This is a video that I've never done yet, even though I have done quite a bit of experimenting in this area, especially back in the early days when I was just starting to work on guitars and play with guitars and try to get better tone and that kind of thing. I did a lot of playing around and experimenting with this thing, but this is the first time I've ever done this on video. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at bridge pins. The effect of different bridge pins on different guitars. I've got 3 sets of bridge pins here. I've got bone, I've got ebony, and I have antique acoustic galilith pins, which are really, really hard plastic. I'm going to choose those because those are the 3 pins that I use the most. And I'm only going to use 3 because we got to keep this down to a reasonable amount of time. So no fossil walrus ivory. We can talk about fossil walrus ivory. We can talk about water buffalo horn, which is a pin that I used a lot back in the early days. Both of those are good pins. I think they have their definitely have their uses and pros. But I'm going to use these 3 because these are the most common. Now, I feel like fossil walrus ivory is sort of in the spectrum that bone is. So if you even hear any difference between them, listen to the difference between the ebony and the bone. And like if this is ebony, it is ebony. And this is bone. Fossil walrus ivory, to me, is like somewhere right over here. So, it's not in between. It's not over here. It's on the other side of bone. Water buffalo horn is interesting. We'll talk about that. First thing we got to do here, we got to figure out, is there a difference? Do you hear any difference? And does the frequency spectrogram show any kind of difference? This is a frequency spectrogram app that's just on a Samsung A9 tablet. It's no big deal. But I'll have in other videos demonstrated that this will indeed pick up tone differences. And I did that using a Telecaster. I plugged the Telecaster in, put it on the bridge pickup, and I rolled the the tone all the way up with no tone shaping, and then recorded it on here, tone all the way off, and that's a very physical thing. In other words, you know that the tone pop makes a difference because it's a physical thing. That's what it's there for. And did this pick up a difference in the graph? And yes, it did pick up a difference in the graph. So that demonstrates that this is capable, in fact, of picking up at least the difference from a Telecaster tone knob. So if we see some differences in the frequencies of these various guitars, I think that's just further evidence to what your ears are telling you. Your ears are kind of funny. Of course, you don't have a dog in this fight here. You're not buying any of these pins. And that's a common saying, is that, well, you paid for more for them, so of course you think they're going to sound better. Well, that's not always true because, I'm a pretty frugal kind of guy. And I think I go the other way around, is that, well, I paid money for these and they better be good. And I come in very skeptical. Like, well, they're not that good. I paid a lot of money for this and they're not that good. I don't like them. I absolutely do not believe in the saying that you get what you pay for, because I can give you a piece of inferior merchandise and I can charge you more for it. For instance, neck resets, okay? I charge $300 for neck resets. I think I'm up to $350. I think I'm going up a little bit finally. But I could charge you $700. I could charge you $10,000 for a neck reset. And it would be the same neck reset that you got from me for $350. Did you get more? No, it's the same thing. I mean, I'm just charging you more money because the market demands, the market allows it, that kind of thing. You got the same thing. So you don't always get more. You don't always get what you pay for. Sorry, it's dumb. I don't think you can produce a top shelf, thing. You can't produce an authentic Martin for $100. So in that respect, yes, you're going to get what you pay for. But this is a Martin DM sitting in my lap right here. It's a $500 used guitar. If I sold the same guitar to some market for $3,000, you didn't get your money's worth on it. So, point of this being is, on the pins, you do not have a dog in this fight. We're just listening to these pins. I can put a piece of tape over them if you want to, so you don't even know what pin I'm using. I'd be happy to do that. That's a blind test. It's not a double blind because I know what's going on. Because I don't have a lab assistant here to change pins for me and hand them to me blindfolded and that kind of thing, which would be great to do. It'd be a lot of fun to do that. But we're going to do seat of the pants science here rather than true science. So anyway, we're going to look at these pins. Let's see if we hear any differences in them. Now, I will say this. These are all unslotted pins. And I'm going to be able to, in order to try to minimize the effect of loosening and tightening the strings, which may or may not kill the strings. I don't know. We haven't tested that yet. But in order to minimize that, I'm going to try to hot swap these as much as I can. So I'm going to take just a little bit of tension off. I'm going to pop the pins out of here, and they should stay in place sometimes. And then I'm going to put the different pins back in here, and then we're going to come back and we're going to listen to them. Now, having said all that stuff, I'm going to discuss more of this after we listen to the guitars, because everybody wants to listen to the guitars, and I don't blame you. That's what you want to do. You want to hear the differences, if there's any differences. So we're going to do the guitars. I'm going to do each guitar in a set. So I'm going to do this Martin DM, which is an inexpensive Martin. So this is a cheap guitar. It's got laminated back and sides. It's spruce top, but it's nothing fancy. It doesn't even have all the braces in it. It's so I got one tone bar in it. So this is an inexpensive Martin guitar. Then I'm going to use let's use the D28 1941 Authentic. That's a very popular guitar in my videos. We're going to use it, and we're going to use the D18 1937 Authentic. So we have state-of-the-art rosewood guitar, state-of-the-art mahogany guitar. So you have rosewood, mahogany, and cheap. And I will start with the pins. I'm going to start with whatever's in them. So there's going to be a little bit of a random order going on here. So this one's got ebony in it. We're going to start with the ebony, and then I'll go through the 3 pins, and I'll go ahead and pop up on the video, which pin you're listening to at that time. And I will show you the frequency spectrogram too, which I will set right here, and I will try. I won't move it. It'll be the same distance, just like the microphone. It'll be the same distance away from the guitar. I'll try to play the same, I can regulate my hand pretty good. Yeah, there's going to be some variations, but, I'm not going to play frantically hard and then super soft on the other. I'll play my normal pace. There might be some minor variations in that. It doesn't matter. Listen for the tone. All right, I went back and checked all my pictures, and I think I have all the correct pictures. I think I got pictures of everything. I had to edit them because on your tablet it doesn't give you an option to leave a file name or anything. It just blindly saves them, and then off you go. So, but I didn't write on them, and so I think I got them all. Observations here. First of all, I thought I heard some differences. So you see what you think. I think, for instance, glaring thing is when I put the bone on that DM, man, it was just, oh, God, it was harsh. I couldn't stand it. When I put ebony on the D18 37A over there, I was surprised how good it sounded. I thought that sounds hard to describe, a little airy, a little bit more open. It seemed like it got a little bit more volume too, just a little, When I put the bone on the D28 here, I was surprised that it sounded good. So there's some differences here. On the whole, I think the bone is too jangly, and definitely seems like it has more powerful trebles on there. And I'm talking about this before I go look at the spectrograms here. So these are just my impressions here sitting here. I was surprised that I liked the bone on the D28. And I think maybe because the D28s already have a bassy sound. And so the bone kind of adds that clarity, or maybe not clarity, but it adds a high-end sparkle to it. Now, I quit using bone for the most part. I used to use bone a lot. I backed off of it a little bit, and here's why. Because on customers' guitars, I have found that I get more complaints with the ball end jangling against the pin than any other pin. So if you don't seat non-slotted bridge pins, slotted bridge, non-slotted pins, if you don't seat it correctly and pull up on this thing and make sure that ball end is seated, it'll rattle on the pin. This is an important point. We're going to come back to that in just a second. It'll rattle on the pin and produce a really high-pitched buzz. And I cannot tell you how many times I have had a customer say, well, I've got this buzz on certain notes, and I said, check your ball ends. And sure enough, one of them is not quite seated, and it's rattling on the pin. Pull it up. And I just have that problem more with bone pins than any other pin. Also, in the bridges that I have personally made, I think I don't get very many cracks, bridges back, but I think every single one has been with bone pins. And whether it's because they don't expand with humidity, because they don't have any give to them like ebony does, or even plastic, they've got no give at all, maybe that fosters cracking. I don't know. I just backed off of bone pins a little bit. So same thing with fossil walrus ivory, and any kind of really super hard pin like that, I just kind of backed off of them just a little bit. So I will say with fossil walrus ivory is I used it a lot way back in the day, and I especially was using it on a Collins Clarence White Brazilian Adirondack, which is just a really bright guitar and didn't have any bass to it, didn't have any Martin whomp. And the whole time I owned that guitar for 7 years, I was trying to get more warmth and more bass sound out of it without losing the clarity. And the best thing I found was scalloping the saddle, which is a whole nother deal. That's a Dan Lashbrook trick. Props to Dan Lashbrook for giving me that idea. But anyway, I used fossil walrus ivory on there, but then it was too much. It was too much jangle, too much sustain too. So what I ended up doing is cutting the heads off of them. So I would take my $200 fossil walrus ivory pins and put them on the, and I actually ended up getting seconds for this purpose. I didn't destroy good pins, but I file those heads off so they're just nothing. And then I would go inside the guitar and mark with a pencil where the ball end was, pull that out, and I would cut that out. So I cut all the excess weight off of the pins. And then they sounded good, and I still have a couple pair like that. And that's another thing that Dan Lashbrook does is, I got a set of pins from him one time that was in another guitar, and they were super, super short. I actually am using those pins in my number one Pru now because that was a really good combination of the fossil walrus ivory, but not so much mass to it, to where it just jangled for days and days and days. So, that was a real fine-tuning thing. And on my number one Pru, I go back and forth between a couple of different kinds of pins just to, play with different sounds on it. So let's talk for a minute whether or not the pins make a difference and why they might make a difference. So I see a couple of things going on here, assuming that you even heard a difference. They weren't all identical, and again, I haven't looked at the spectrograms, and so if they all end up identical, then just forget it. But I think there's going to be some differences in the frequencies spectrograms. I think I know. All right, there's two things happening here, maybe three. Let's talk about the first one. The first one is the string going over the saddle here. The string's going over the saddle, and now the string is going down inside there, and it's contacting the pin. So here's your pin, and the string comes across the saddle and goes down here, and it touches the pin going down into the bridge. And then the ball end is down at the bottom, and the ball end rests up against the bridge plate. Now, a lot of people will tell you that there's no vibration transfer past the saddle. And I really disagree with that. And we need to test that. There needs to be a way to test it. And there is a way to test it, but you got to test it the right way, I think. I don't think it's going to be valid to put a probe on the string here. I think you're going to have to put that strobe on the inside. And here's my thinking on this, okay? It's just my thinking on this. When you're picking, first of all, you know that the wound string is wound over a core wire. That's a key point here. When you're picking, you play on the top half of the string. You play on the top half of the string, you get that excited, the vibrations go down there. The bottom half of that string is what's sitting on the saddle. So, I just don't see the vibrations going across the top of the string, and all of the vibrations just going straight down into the saddle. I just don't see it like that. I see the core vibrate. I see the winding vibrating the core that's inside there. The core then goes down like this, and the core is wrapped around the ball end of the string. And that ball end is snug up against the bridge plate, and so is the core string. If you look inside there, you'll see that the winding is there, but you also see that the naked core part of the string is up against the bridge plate. So I see a couple things happening here. I think the vibrations go across the winding, go down there, and then that winding is contacting the bridge pin, putting vibrations into it, and the bridge pin is sitting in the bridge, and vibrations go off into the bridge, and then they go off into the top. Okay? It's small. I'm not saying this is a big major deal. This is not a major component of your tone. But I have just kind of noticed, that if your pins fit such, if your slot is so deep that the string fits completely into that slot, never touches the pin, so that I could totally pull these things out and your string stays in there. You cannot do that with my slotted bridges. There is enough pressure still in the string that if I try to pull this out under full tension, the string will pop out. But if you overslot this bridge so that the string is sitting let's use some big figures here. Let's use this. This is the slot in the bridge. And the string sits so far down into here that it never touches the pin, then I don't think you're going to hear very much difference between different pins. Maybe a little bit. But if the string contacts the pin like that, so that the pin is actually pushing the string into the bridge, I think you're going to pick up some vibration contact on that pin, and that's going to transfer off into the bridge, and that's going to transfer off into the top. It's small. Now here's my support for this idea. I just told you a minute ago the bone pins are susceptible to the ball end rattling on them. So if no vibrations make it past the saddle, all the vibrations come over here, hit that saddle, and dive down into the bridge, and that's it. No vibrations ever get past the saddle. Then how come the ball end is rattling? Why is the ball end vibrating enough to rattle? Well, maybe it's because the top itself is exciting it. Maybe that's a possibility. But the point is this. Down there in that ball end, there's some vibrations happening. Whether they come across the top, whether they come across the string and go down, or whether they come from the top being excited, I don't know. But the ball end is rattling. And the same thing up here. You'll hear people say, oh, well, the nut stops it. And as soon as you fret right here, then the nut is out of the equation. Then how come your tuners vibrate? Your tuners will vibrate, and if you have a loose tuner button, it'll drive you crazy because it's vibrating. There's vibrations happening up here in the headstock. And also, if you fret right here, sometimes you'll get what's referred to as a back buzz, and it's a buzz between your fretted note and the nut. It's this right here. This right here is vibrating. Now, obviously, I'm picking it right now. But you will see this, and I used to see this a lot in Collins guitars because of the way they set their nut height and that kind of thing, the nut slots. And because they were such bright guitars, they were able to pick that up. And especially on Collins guitars, I had customers, man, I get this back buzz. I hear this buzz that I can't find anything. And I would have them get the buzz, make it happen, and then have someone hold their hand very lightly right here. And that would stop it. So there's vibrations happening here. The fretted note does not stop it. Vibration happens in between here. It's like a little bitty guitar. If the nut's of good material, it's going to catch those vibrations. It's going to send it down the neck. You'll feel the neck vibrating in your hand. The neck is attached to the body. And if you don't have a popsicle brace, then the upper body up about is free to vibrate. It's just a hypothesis, dudes. Just a hypothesis. But I know that the lighter the tuners, the better the nut. The tighter and more solid this neck is, you will feel the vibrations in your hand as you're playing. You can have heavy tuners, a cardboard nut, terrible frets, and a floppy neck, and you'll play and you won't feel that. But when you get everything stiff, tight, solid, you will feel the vibrations in your hand. Neck vibrates. First of all, your bones are going to pick up that vibration, and you're going to hear that in your body. It's not just your ears. Your face works. Your bones work. You can take a tuning fork and put it in your teeth, and you will hear that. And you can hold the tuning fork and you can hear it. You can hear it through your hands. So the more vibrations you get happening here, you will feel those. Maybe not necessarily, obviously not like the audience can't hear it, but you'll feel it and hear it, and you will pick up more with the guitar, and it'll just be a more fun playing sensation. All right, point is, when you fret a note, vibrations happen from here because your tuners are rattled. Same thing here. Why does that ball end vibrate? Why would the bridge plate make any difference whatsoever if something wasn't happening inside there? And I guarantee you, I don't guarantee you, I haven't tested it, but the bridge plate wood makes a difference. We can put a cardboard bridge plate in there in one of the guitars, and we'll test it and see. So there's something going on here. I'm certain. All right, the second thing that goes on is the mass, the weight of the thing. And I will weigh these pins on the scale, and I'll pop them up here at the end of this video, and you can see how much these pins weigh. More mass on here is going to lead probably to more sustain. Less attack, more sustain. Attack is how fast the note comes out, but also how fast it decays. So a note that comes up fast, the energy that you put into this is produced into that note, coming up fast. Boom. But a fast attack generally leads to a fast decay. So you end up with that little DM over there, for instance. Fast attack, fast decay. It's got no sustain. It sounds thin. It sounds spiky, would be a good word. It's not a bad thing. There's some fun things you can do on that DM that these guitars don't quite do as good. In general, I don't like too much sustain as a flat picker. Too much sustain washes over. So if I'm given a choice between flat picking on a Les Paul or a Telecaster, I'm taking the Telecaster because it's got a faster decay to it. And that's why it works so good at chicken picking, because you can put all those notes in there and they don't wash all the way over each other like they do on a Les Paul. So sustain is not always a great thing. You can use it, of course, but for flat picking, I don't like too much sustain. I want some sustain. All right, point. Mass will tend to increase that. It stores energy, it releases it softer. So you put energy in here and it goes into a heavy pin, boom, it reduces the spike so it seems smoother, and it releases that energy slower. So you get a warmer, richer, fuller, more sustained sound. So that's why I think the bone kind of works good on the D28 here, because it smooths it out. It's adding something to it, and it's doing something to the D28 that it didn't do on, definitely didn't do on that DM over there. And it was okay on the 18, but putting white pins on a D18 is negative. No way. So you got mass going on here. You have what I really think is a little bit of string vibration somehow transferring into the top. Obviously, I haven't tested this. I don't have other tours tested, but that's my hypothesis. Okay? So sitting there playing it, I was surprised at how well I liked the bone pins, but I was surprised at how well I liked the ebony on the D18. And I'm going to leave the ebony pins in the D18 for a little while and play them. And I definitely like the ebony and the DM, and that's fine because it's a cheap guitar. They're cheap pins. It's got the Acoustics in it still right now, so maybe I'll just leave them in there for a little bit. But I definitely thought I heard some differences. They're not great big differences, Not even as much as maybe a pick and strings. But when you're choosing a pick, when I'm choosing a pick, there's this feel that I want out of that pick. So if I want a brighter sound, I can't just necessarily go to a thinner pick or sharper point, because I still need the rhythm sound going on. So I can't just choose the pick that I want for the sound. There's also a whole component how it feels in my hand. Same thing with the strings. Strings make some differences here and there, but I want a string that feels good and doesn't squeak really bad. So I'm using Diodaria XS right now, and I've been using nano webs forever. Anyway, point being, sometimes you can't always get what you want. You've got to work with your possibilities here. So I see the pins as being one of the components that don't bother me when I'm playing. It's not a pick that I'm holding in my hand. It's not a string that's under my finger. It's something that sits down there and stays out of my way. So the pins are a pretty good way to very, very slightly shape your sound. I'll give you one or two couple of stories here. One time, way back when, we were at a festival jam session sort of thing, and my mother was in the room, and she doesn't know anything about this. She couldn't care less. And I had a D28 1935 Special, which is one of my first decent, really good guitars, and it had absolutely no cut. It had a terrific, awesome, fat rhythm sound, but on leads, it was nothing. It had no treble, no bite, no cut, no nothing. And I was trying to get some cut out of it so that it would cut through better in leads. So we're sitting there. She's reading the newspaper and drinking coffee. And I played it a little bit and then detuned quietly, changed the pins, tuned it back up, and then played the guitar. And I was not even paying attention to anything, you know. And she put a newspaper down and looked up and said, "What'd you just do to that guitar?" And I said, "Why?" And she said, "It sounds so much, I don't have the words for it." But, you know, she went like this. It sounds so much. She said, I said, "It sounds different?" Oh, she said, "It sounds way different. Completely different." It caught my attention when I was reading the newspaper and drinking coffee. So that's, you know, a real life anecdote story. I mean, there it is. It's something where somebody who's not a guitar player, doesn't even really like guitars, was not paying attention, was reading the newspaper, drinking coffee, and noticed the difference in sound enough to look up and comment on it. So, how do we deal with that? You know, there's people that tell you pins make no difference at all. But how do you deal with that? That story right there. You know, I don't know why. I don't know how. I don't know what the differences were. I ran, and those were fossil walrus ivory pins, by the way. I think I was switching from plastic to fossil walrus ivory. I mean, a big change, you know. So there's some things on pins. All right, I think we've got the basis started at least, you know. There's so much more to, you know, you could look at. But let's see if we hear differences between these three guitars, these three sets of pins, these three sets of pins on these three guitars. Do we hear any differences? And do we see any differences? If we do, then that's a starting point that the whole pin thing is worth investigating. And then later on, a person can go in and figure out why, what's happening there. If you don't hear any differences, then you are a happy person, and you don't have to go down the pin rabbit hole at all. Now, me personally, I have just pretty much kind of settled into ebony, antique acoustics. Occasionally, I use water buffalo horn, which I like. I think water buffalo horn gives a little bit of a crisper sound without being too shrill. It used to be what I would use on mahogany guitars. I really like it. So I still like that material. It comes in black, so it's very appropriate on a D18. It can go on any of these guitars. I like it. I like water buffalo horn. It looks good. It's fun. So we could go down that hole. We can pursue water buffalo horn. I've used snakewood pins. Stu Mack used to sell snakewood, and it's a brown color, and it looks great on guitars with rosewood bridges like that DM over there. I've run it on my Pru before, which has a rosewood bridge. Snakewood seems to be a little bit sharper, a little bit clearer, just a little bit more than ebony. Ebony can sound a little bit kind of fuzzy to me sometimes, just a little. Just a little. But my basic go-to pins these days are ebony and antique acoustics. And that's, I just stopped there, you know. If a customer wants to play with pins, go for it. I mean, there's fun stuff there. And if nothing else, then you can say, I'm going for the looks, you know. That's what you can always say, because fossil walrus ivory pins can look really good. And it's like, well, I'm going for the looks. I'm going for a long saddle, because I like the way it looks. Good enough, you know. So, I'm going to leave all these pins alone for right now. I'm going to leave the bone on this D28. I'm going to leave the ebony on the D18. And I'm going to leave the antique acoustic over there in the DM. And later on, I'll switch them out. So I'm going to go out and get some weights on these pins, and I'm going to put that at the end of the video and see what they are. Let me hear your comments. I love hearing from you guys, especially good comments, where you give me your thoughts, your observations, that stuff. I like good stuff. Talk about it. See ya.